So even when I was born, the doctor was, surprised and shocked that I had come out of my mother's womb with a birth defect. So they rushed me off to examine me to determine, what's happening, what is this, you know. I even had no sore spot and no room. So I had no, my skull had already fused together. So I had no sore spot, which allows the brain to grow and allow the brain to function normally.
Welcome to the Audacious Living Podcast, hosted by my man, Audley Stephenson, the Odd Man.
Greetings and salutations. Welcome to the Audacious Living Podcast, where we explore the remarkable journeys of individuals who embody the spirit of audacity and resilience. Our goal is to help you live your best audacious life ever. It's always a pleasure to be here sharing inspiring stories that resonate deeply, and I want to take a moment to express my gratitude to each and every single one of you, our listeners, for spending time out of your day with us. Today's episode is particularly special as we dive into the incredible journey of Dorsey Ross. Now, imagine being born into a world of significant physical challenges where every step is a testament to courage and determination. Dorsey was born with Apert syndrome, a condition that posed profound obstacles and required numerous surgeries throughout his life. I think it's like 68 surgeries he said that he went through. Was just absolutely incredible. But just like a mighty oak tree that grows strong despite the storms, Dorsey's life is a beautiful illustration of resilience. His parents played a crucial role in his journey, giving him the independence to explore the world while instilling a profound sense of faith that would guide him through life's toughest moments. Dorsey emphasizes the importance of listening to positive voices, encouraging everyone to rise above adversity and embrace their unique past. Now he's an ordained minister, speaker, and podcaster. Dorsey is passionately sharing his story to inspire others to overcome their struggles and live audaciously. Dorsey is a remarkable individual. He's an inspiring individual, quite frankly, and he's transformed his challenges into motivation for others. Born in Long Island, New York, he's faced life with the Apert syndrome, a condition that presents against significant physical challenges to him, and he'll talk extensively about that in our conversation. Despite the odds, he thrived with the unwavering support of his parents, who instilled in him a strong faith and belief in his potential. Today, Dorsey, again, he's an ordained minister, motivational speaker, and host of his own podcast where he shares his journey and encourages others to embrace their audacious lives. It's a great conversation. You absolutely will love his story, and I can't wait to dig into it with you guys. So without any further ado, let's turn to our chat with Dorsey. Enjoy. Hey, Dorsey, thank you for joining me here today on the Audacious Living. Pleasure to have you joining me today. Thank you.
Thank you, Audley, so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no, listen, I've always said that the opportunity to engage in dialogues that can potentially help other people is really a blessing to be a part of that, and it excites me. And so, thank you for helping me kind of fulfill my own personal mission, because it is something that's important to me. Here on this podcast, we talk a lot about, encouraging individuals to live that best audacious life, right? And I think a really, really important and significant piece to live that life is understanding that we all are on our own individual paths, right? And so that path has its own unique journey, its own unique set of challenges, circumstances, however you want to call them, and they're unique to us. And it's incumbent as individuals on us as individuals to get through them, get past them, to overcome them. Because on the other side of that is where all the greatness lies, all the good stuff, right? But you can't get there until you get to the bad stuff. And so that's kind of the approach we take here. Your story dealing with Apert syndrome, and I we'll get you to talk about that a bit, is a unique one to you, and it's presented its own life challenges and obstacles and circumstances that you've overcome, and I think that's a really powerful story. So maybe as a starting point, I can get you to introduce yourself to the audience, talk a bit
Well,
about your journey and what's got you to the point that you're at now.
yeah, and that's a pretty good, pretty good pronunciation of that of Apert Kingdom there. A lot of people, they're like, how do you pronounce it? Or is it, how you like
See, I said
this or
Apert.
that?
I said Apert. It's Apert, right? So there you go.
Well, it's close enough.
Appreciate the grace. Appreciate the grace.
Yeah, so obviously, my name is Dorsey Ross. I am 48 years old. I am originally from Long Island, Queens, Long Island, New York. I'm currently living in Westchester, Pennsylvania, and I am an ordained minister. And I used to travel around and speak and share my story, share my testimony. I have my own podcast at the moment, and you know, going back to my story, I was born with Apert syndrome, and what Apert syndrome is it's a birth defect, a malformation of the hands and face. So when I was born, my forehead was pushed outward,
Hmm.
my eyes and nose were pushed back into my head, and my fingers and toes were fused together, meaning I had no individual movement of them. It's almost like, in the wintertime, sometimes a lot of the gloves now that you put on your hand are all individual fingers. But sometimes when you're younger, you put on that glove
Right.
without the fingers.
Yes.
And that's how my hand was. It was a glove without
Mm.
fingers. So
Commit.
you didn't have the individual,
Mm.
movement
Yes.
of
Yes.
the fingers. And my parents were up in age. My mom was 41, my dad was 45. When they had me, they had older kids at the time,
Hmm.
and they didn't think that they were gonna get pregnant again. This was not a expected pregnancy.
Right. Right.
This was a surprise.
Yes.
A surprise of the family. And my mom started to gain weight, and she was like, okay, what's going on with me? What's happening? She went to the doctor thinking there was some type of tumor or growth or whatnot. And the doctor said to her, well, it's not a growth or a tumor, but you do have a baby growing inside of you. And I was born on January 16th, 1977. So back then, unlike today, they didn't have all the technology and all the tools and machines to be able to do all the testing like they can today to determine the health of the baby. If it gonna have birth defects, all these things that they do today. So even when I was born, the doctor was, surprised and shocked that I had come out of my mother's womb with a birth defect. So they rushed me off to examine me to determine, what's happening, what is this, you know. I even had no sore spot and no room. So I had no, my skull had already fused together. So I had no sore spot, which allows the brain to grow and allow the brain to function normally. So long story short, the doctors come back in. They said, hey, we don't think your child is going to survive. We think he'll eventually become brain dead
Hmm.
because he has no room for his brain to grow and to function normally.
Right.
And, we think that the best option for him or for you would be to put him into a institution and to let him be. Thankfully, my parents were people of faith and said, no, you know, we can't do that. This is a child that God has given us. We're not going to be able to do that to this child.
Right. that so when you sort of think about that and that decision that your parents had to make, it certainly was one of faith. I hear that loud and clear.
Yeah, absolutely. It was definitely one of faith that, they believed, that God was going to, you know, bring me through, these operations. They didn't care how long I was going to live for. They said that regardless of what would happen, they would take me home. And there was a nurse in the hospital. I was born in Mary Immaculate Hospital, which is no longer there in Jamaica, New York. And they had one of the nurses in the hospital, whether it's my nurse at the time or just someone that heard my about my situation, came to my parents and said, "Hey, look, doctors at Columbia Presbyterian Hospital in the Bronx, New York, which is a very well known hospital, they're doing babies on, good, on people like your son. Why don't you take him there
Hmm.
and see what they can tell you?" And my parents did, and the doctors there said, "Well, yes, we can operate on your son. We can, make a hole in his skull, to relieve the pressure on
Yeah.
his brain."
Hmm.
And he'll have a lot of obstacles and a lot of difficulties to overcome, but he'll survive.
Right.
And even at one point, the doctors, told my parents, "Hey, we don't think he'll live past the age of 18." And here I am, 30 plus years past that date
Yes. Yeah.
and 48 years past the date of, "Hey, we think he'll be brain dead. We don't think
Right.
he'll
Yes.
survive."
Yeah. Yeah. That's beautiful. And I love that timeline and how you frame that because it really speaks to what your journey and a journey of overcoming, right? You've had to do a lot of overcoming. They predicted that would be an issue for you, and you've lived it. And so maybe I'd like to talk about how you overcome.
Yeah,
As a child, you reference you were made fun of and picked on and all sorts of things, and bullying
absolutely.
was part of the issue as well. Yeah, how did you overcome all that?
I think, well, obviously my faith, played a big part in that, but
Hmm.
also my parents played a big part in that as well.
Mm,
Because the one thing my parents, you know, they didn't hold me back.
okay.
They didn't hold me back. They allowed me to go out into the world, go out and unlike today, the kids today and the teenagers today, they're on their phones, they're on their tablets, they're on their video games. But 30, 40 years ago, we would be out in the street, playing baseball, playing football, playing, cops and robbers and all these things. We didn't have the technology like we do today. So my point being is they allowed me to go out into the street and play baseball and play football and play all these things, run around. And they didn't, not that they didn't care what happened to me, obviously, but they allowed me to figure out for myself what I could and could not do. And really, yes, I have limitations in what I'm not able to do, but couldn't wasn't very much. Yes, I can't lift my hands
Right.
above my head because of the rotations and the skeletal, you know, birth defect that I was born with. And so I was able to figure out, what am I not able to do? And one of my life sayings is can't is not in my vocabulary.
Hmm.
You get to know me, well enough and long enough, you'll know that I don't use that word very often, if at all. And I was able to go to a school for people with disabilities called the Henry Viscardi School from fifth grade, from kindergarten to high school. that's the schooling that I knew was a school for people with
Right.
disabilities. And even in that school, you would think that every student in that school had a disability. Some of
Mm,
the teachers in that school had a disability. And you would think that it would be a loving and caring environment. And some of it, and a lot of it was, but some of it wasn't. That you would have students teasing and making fun of
yep.
other students, including myself.
Hmm.
And even in the outside world, out of the four walls of that school, I would get teased, like you mentioned. I would get called monster. I would get called freak. You
Mm,
know, and even to this day, I would call them triggers that people do what people say and people act like, and I'm like, what is going on? I don't think you're doing that because of that. I think you're doing it because of me and
right.
because of the way that I look.
Right.
Don't make an excuse that you're doing this, but you're really, making fun of me. So I overcame it because I realized as I started to learn more about God and learn more about His Word,
Hmm.
as it says in Psalm 139, 13 to 17, He created me in my mother's womb. He
Hmm.
knew that, yes, because we live in a fallen world and things happen, He knew that I would be born with a birth defect.
Yes. Yes.
And He knew that He would be able to use me for His good and for His will for my life, and that He would protect me and He would surround me and allow me to figure out for myself that I was created in His masterpiece, that I was created in the image of, in the image of God, and that the doctor would use my father's face and his face, and that the doctor would use that image of my father, my physical father, use that his face to form of all the operations that I had to go through, form it to look more like my dad.
As you're talking, I just couldn't help but smile, right? Because it's like you're leaning into the promises, and you're applying, and not only leaning into them, you're applying them into your own life, and standing by that, and built your sort of, built your platform around that, which, I really do think is a beautiful, beautiful thing. Um, so you talked about your parents, how they helped you move through these challenges. How did it feel in the moment, though? I guess I'm curious. I mean, again, getting the support to help you, I understand that, and it's a beautiful
Sure.
thing that you had that.
Yeah.
But there was still a feeling, I would imagine, that you were experiencing.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It was definitely tough. It was definitely difficult.
Hmm.
Schooling, was not an easy thing for me to do. I was in and out of the hospital so often. Up until the age of 15, over my lifetime, I've had about 68 operations because of the separation of the hands and or the fingers, and to reconstruct my face. I've had about 68 operations. So I was, when in my younger days, in my younger years, I was in and out of the hospital a lot. And so they had to have you know, what I guess what they would call today homeschool, a teacher from the school come and homeschool me during my time that I was not able to go to school, and teach me what the kids were learning in the school and in the classes so I can keep up with what they were being taught. And so I was, it was difficult with that. It was difficult to learn how to ride a bike a little bit, even though I was able to, master that and be able to overcome that, and, think of that nature. And, as I got older, I started, as we all do, we start to think about, what's my future going to look like? What's my future going to hold for me? And from the time I was 13, I started to attend the youth group at my church, which was a very loving, caring environment. No one ever teased me, no one ever made fun of me. They roasted me for my 18th birthday, which was
Mm-hmm.
all done in fun, and we were all
Mm-hmm.
laughing and everything. And I went on the youth group events and, the getaways and conventions and all that good
Mm-hmm.
stuff. And, it was a place where they accepted me. It was a place where they loved on me and they cared for me. And as I got older, I started to realize that I wanted to speak into their lives and encourage them and, help them to grow in God and in what God had for them. Now, I don't. Am I going off my topic a little bit, or off your
Keep on
question?
that train, man. Keep going. That's right, that
Okay.
train.
So as I was saying, school was a little difficult for me, even in high school. Junior high and high school, it was a little difficult for me. So it was kind of difficult to, in my own head to try to see what I wanted to do. I had my ideas of doing something with computers, possibly going back to and becoming a nurse to, give back to
Mm-hmm.
all
Mm-hmm.
those nurses and doctors that helped me
Sure, sure.
in my time. But then I realized that, I didn't like dealing with blood. I didn't like having the needle stuck in my arms and dealing with blood and dealing with that. So that was out of the question. And then I thought about, what would it be like if I went on to, study and possibly become a youth pastor, since the youth pastors that in my life that I had were encouraging to me and inspiring to me and, were always hopeful in my life and always, encouraging to me. Maybe that's what I could do. And as I got older, or getting ready to graduate high school, I had to have this meeting. And this is where, and again, another spot where obviously my parents played a big role in my life, but this is another big spot in my life where my mom played a big role, and my dad did too. And so there was an IUP meeting, which is a meeting where kids,
Yep.
go and they determine what they're going to do after they graduate, because not every student that I went to school with, because we all had certain degrees of disability, were able to go on to college. And in this meeting, they asked my high school history teacher, "Do you think that Dorsey will be able to make it in college?" And he said, "No, I don't think that Dorsey will be able to make it in college. I don't think he has the ability to make it in college." And then they asked me,
Mm-hmm.
and I had no idea what I was getting into. Talking about college and, oh yeah, it'll be no problem. I can do college. So I was like, yeah, I think I can do it.
Mm-hmm.
And then they asked my mom. My mom was sitting next to me, and she said, "If he thinks he can do it, he will."
I love it. I love it. And that's that sense of instilling that sense of belief, to feel that you can overcome. What was the biggest challenge or the hardest thing that you did that you had to, like, you look back and, wow, I'm really proud I did that and I feel good about it. What was that?
Going to college.
Okay. Yeah.
Because I went to community college first, and then I went to Bible college. It took me 4 years in community college to do, and then another 5 years at what is now the University of Valley Forge here in Pennsylvania. And unfortunately, my mom wasn't there to see me cross the stage to receive my bachelor's degree from the Bible college because she passed away while I was at Bible college in 2002, December 7th, 2002. My mom passed away due to complications from a stroke that she had back in September or August, August of that year.
Mm.
But I was able to, cross that stage and, you know, I probably got the biggest applause of anybody
Absolutely. Well
in
deserved,
that
for
line
sure.
that day.
That's so awesome. And a little bit just about the syndrome and
Yeah,
give an audience sort of a picture or flavor, if you will.
sure.
So they talked about you only living to 18, and they were 30 years wrong and counting still. And
Yep,
uh, in terms of the sort of expectations of how someone with Apert syndrome
yep.
would live their life, what does that look like?
Well, we can live, a quote unquote, a normal lifespan, whatever that looks like
Hmm.
at the time. I've known and heard of people that are in their 60s right now living with Apert syndrome. There are thousands and maybe hundreds of thousands of people with Apert syndrome on this world, and I know several of them. Have been, fortunate enough to meet several of them over my over my lifetime. And I think with any type of disability, there are variety. I don't know if you want to use the word variety, but there are different forms of the disability.
Hmm.
Some are more severe. They have unfortunately some may end up in a wheelchair. Because they can't. Their legs start to give out, or their hips start to give out. Like I said earlier, it's a skeletal bone disease, not bone disease, but bone defect. Because some of
Right.
the bones are, formed and
Hmm.
fused together, and that's what happens with my foot, with my shoulder. The bones in my shoulder are fused together, so I can't lift my hands above my above my head. And so like I said, it's a normal birth defect. It's a 1 in 85,000 and 1 in 120,000, statistic that people are going to be born with this birth defect.
Hmm. Hmm. So I'm wondering if maybe you can describe sort of your lowest point and what that looked like.
Yeah. Well, I think the lowest point, was going back to it was being teased and made fun of, you
Hmm.
know, and not really understanding, how someone can be, so cruel and
Right.
so disheartening to another human being to tease and make fun of them, you know,
Hmm.
and also, another part of that would be not knowing, what was in front of me, not knowing what kind of life I would be able to live, or what I would be able to accomplish in my life. So there
Hmm.
were times where I felt like ending my life.
Mm.
I never attempted it. I never, put anything in my mouth or put anything on my
Yep.
wrist,
Yep. Yep.
anything like that. You know, thank God. But there were times when I dealt with that.
Hmm.
But then, again, my faith kicked in, and God came through. And he said, "Hey, don't give up.
Those
Yeah,
promises, right?
I have greater plans and purposes for your
Love it.
life." And I have my own podcast. All glory to God, but I have my own podcast now.
Love
I've
it.
traveled the United States of America for 16, 18 years, to about 20 different states, giving my giving my story.
Gotcha.
I
Gotcha.
authored my own book. All these things.
I love it. I love it. Um, you became an evangelist, as you
I
mentioned,
did.
right?
I
Um,
did.
was that part of the plan, or how did that come to be?
It actually wasn't part of the plan.
Okay.
Um, you know, because like I said, I wanted to be a youth pastor, and once I graduated from um, Valley Forge, I went home and I started to attend a different church. I didn't go back to my home church, but I went to a different church where I actually the youth pastor at the time was someone I met at community college, and then he went to Valley Forge, and I followed him. We call it following him to Valley Forge, and then when he graduated, he went back to the church where I started to attend, and I knew the senior pastor at the time. I knew him. Oh well, he still is, but I knew the senior pastor as well, and I knew both of them would encourage me and inspire me to do ministry. Regardless of what that looked like, that they would encourage me to do ministry, and so I would have discussions and talks about going doing different things and doing different ministries, and I just felt like that wasn't what you know God would have me to do.
Hmm.
And then they had a outreach event called Summerfest
Okay.
in August of 2006, and the pastor said, "Hey, if anybody wants to come up, let me know and we'll get you situated and, we can videotape you and we'll have you share and we'll show your video at the outreach event." And at first I didn't want to go up and, be bold and be, prideful type of thing. Like, hey, I'll do it. But I went up anyway and I discussed with the pastor, like, hey, what do you think about me sharing my story? Like, hey, I think it's good idea. And here we did. And during that time, I was, still praying about, what God had for me, where He wanted me to go.
Hmm.
And He was like, hey, send this video out that you're making right now, put a packet together, make calls, if you have to, and send it to different churches and see what doors will open for you.
Right. Right.
And that's what I did. I made a whole big list of churches and pastors and whatnot, and from there I did cold calling for like I said, probably 18 years.
I love the audaciousness of your story. A podcast plug, by the way, but no, I think you absolutely demonstrated that, and again, the idea of kind of not really knowing where this path will go, but you go anyways. Not
Yeah,
sure where the step will lead, but because the staircase is stark, but you step anyways, and
right.
you do that. And obviously, you spoke earlier about the impact of your faith on your life, and I think if there's any time that your faith kicks in, it's in those dark, uncertain moments. And so I'm hearing that loud and clear, which is also wonderful. Tell me, Doris. I'd love to hear. So, if you were to sort of encapsulate, that key message that you're wanting people to hear, or you want people to understand or take away, what would that look like? What would
Yeah,
that be?
don't give up.
Mm,
Don't give up. If whatever you're struggling with, whatever you're dealing with, whatever voices you're listening to that are not the voice of what you want to hear, don't give up. Don't listen to those outside voices that go against what you think about or what you believe or what you want to do for your life. You know,
love it.
listen to the voices that are going to encourage you and going to inspire you to do what it is that you want to do for your life.
Love it. I love it. You talked about being a book, you're an author. Tell us about the book.
Yeah, it's my autobiography.
I love it.
I came out in 2016, and I did a remake of it in 2020.
Sure, because your life updated. It doesn't stop, right?
Right, exactly.
You gotta keep
My
building
life
on that.
updated.
So when's the next one come out? We're at 5 years ago. Come on.
Wow. Somebody actually asked me that yesterday. They're like, "You gonna write another book?" I'm like, I don't know. Let's take one step at a time.
Just add another appendix, if you will, maybe.
Yeah, exactly. There you go.
I love it. What's it called?
It's called Overcomer. God's plan against all odds.
That makes sense.
But the title is definitely Overcomer.
No, definitely makes sense, and to hear, again, it's the story of overcoming is a powerful one, and certainly glad that you are on the other side. And I've talked on this podcast before about sharing our stories and why that's so important, right? And even the parts of stories that we choose to share.
Mhm.
So for example, your story easily could have ended at this bad thing happened to me, and this is what I had to live with, and that was my life, and it could end there. But the overcomer in you pushes past that to tell a much more beautiful and inspiring story. It's
Yeah,
a story of upliftment, of encouragement, one that others can hear and be and take it and apply these things in their own lives. And so hearing that your faith is a big part of it, that help you. And I would imagine, being optimistic and positive attitude, these are all important attributes to have. Is that fair to say?
absolutely, definitely.
Good, 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 good. Tell us about the podcast. Because as a fellow podcaster myself, I got to show some love.
Of course, it is a podcast that started in August, that started in June of 2020.
Okay.
Someone had asked me who had a podcast as well, had asked me to come on his show, and for me to share my story on his show. And I like, what? That was fun. That was interesting. I think that, and it was 2020. The pandemic had already kicked in. No one was traveling, no one was doing this, no one was doing that. We were all home. Sitting at home, not really doing anything. So we're like, that might be something interesting to look into to see. Could I do that? Could I, interview people and whatnot? And I wanted it to be a podcast of encouragement,
Mm-hmm.
podcast of inspiration, that people can listen to it and hear other people's stories of faith and inspiration and encouragement that they can take away from it and be like, hey, if that person can do what they're doing, how much more can I do?
Right.
And it started off a little slow, and it started to pick up, and steamrolling pretty much consistent with it. And I updated a lot of my equipment
Sure.
and whatnot. I'm learning now a little bit now of what I should have done back then, but
Absolutely.
it is what
The
it
pro-
is.
It's a process of life, right? You always can
Right.
build and learn on. And I think there's a concept I very much believe in is better than yesterday, right? So
Right.
yesterday was cool, but let's do better than that. And so self-improvement always, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. We're going to make sure, Dorsey, that the contact details for your podcast as well as for your book and people can connect with you. I'll be in the show notes.
Awesome.
So and I would certainly encourage listeners to do that. I also want to take this opportunity to say thank you, not just for being here, but also for your story, and inspiring one of upliftment, encouragement, and inspiration. Right, really, what you can provide to other people to impact them in ways just by seeing how you lived your life and what you had to overcome. And so, congratulations first on your own personal journey. I think it's important that that's highlighted. But then also, I send an extra congratulations for what you've done with your journey afterwards. Right, like it
Yes,
didn't just
absolutely.
stop with you. You've taken that, you've shared that, and you continue to. And so, thank you for that. And again, thank you, Dorsey, for being a guest on the Audacious Living podcast.
Thank you, Audley.
back we are, here on the podcast, and much thanks and appreciation goes out to Dorsey for being here. Really valued the time together. In our conversation, he shared powerful insights on the significance of faith and resilience in overcoming challenges. He spoke candidly about the bullying he faced during his childhood, and how he learned to rise above the negativity by focusing on the positive voices in his life. And it was so important. Dorsey's message is clear. No matter the obstacles, with faith and determination, we can all carve out our paths and inspire others along the way. And what I personally loved about this conversation was Dorothy's authenticity and his passion for helping others. His story is not just one of survival, but of thriving against all odds, and it serves as a beacon of hope for anyone facing their own battles. I encourage you to connect with Dorsey directly. His contact details, as always, will be located in the show notes below, as well as links to his podcast and his other resources, including his book. Speaking of which, he is offering a special discount on his autobiography. It's titled Overcomer, God's Plan Against All Odds. Again, the details of how you can grab a copy are in the show notes. I want to take this opportunity to thank you for tuning in to another edition of the Audacious Living podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to like, follow, subscribe, and share with family and friends if you haven't already done so. Of course, this is how we continue to grow our audacious community. Together, we can inspire more individuals to live their best audacious lives. Until next time, embrace your journey and stay resilient. Remember, your audacious life awaits.
You've been listening to the Audacious Living Podcast, hosted by Audley Stephenson. If you enjoyed what you heard, be sure to like, subscribe, and share. Until next time, be audacious.